The slap rang out like a gunshot in the sweltering Montana afternoon, and Clara Hayes knew with absolute certainty that if no man bought her today, she would not survive the night. Her cheek burned where the leather glove had struck. The taste of copper filled her mouth. Blood from her split lip ran warm down her chin, but she kept her head high, kept her eyes fixed on a knothole in the wooden beam above the crowd. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She would not beg. Her father had drunk himself into an early grave 3 days ago, tumbling down the tavern stairs with a neck broken as cleanly as Clara's hopes had been. He had left her nothing but debts, $850 to be exact, and now she stood on this platform in Silver Creek, Montana Territory, in the year of our Lord, 1878, the last asset to be liquidated. The auctioneer, a corpulent man named Blackwood who smelled of cigars and cruelty, held a riding crop in one meaty fist. He had already used it once, across Clara's shoulders, when she tried to protest the proceedings. The welt still throbbed beneath the thin fabric of her dress. The only decent dress she owned anymore. Pale blue cotton, faded from too many washings, hanging loose on a frame that had grown gaunt from a week of near starvation. Blackwood raised his voice to carry across the 40 or 50 men gathered in the town square. Ranch owners, miners, drifters, all of them looking at her with eyes that made her skin crawl. They assessed her the way they might assess a horse, checking her teeth, her breeding potential, her capacity for work. "Gentlemen, I present Miss Clara Hayes, 18 years of age, healthy, literate, which is rare in a woman, can cook, clean, sew. Her father's debts stand at $850. She is the final asset." "Do I hear 100? A voice from the crowd, thick with whiskey and something darker. 100. I could use someone to warm my bed and cook my meals." Laughter rippled through the gathering. Clara's stomach turned. Another voice, this one cold and smooth as river stones. 200. Clara's gaze dropped despite her resolve. The man who had spoken stood near the front, tall and broad, with a black beard that failed to hide the cruelty in his face. Silas Crow. Even Clara, new to Silver Creek as she was, had heard the stories. He owned the second largest ranch in the territory. He had buried 2 wives already. Rumor said the second one had tried to run away. Rumor said she had not made it past the property line. Crow's eyes traveled over Clara's body like hands, lingering, possessing. She felt violated just standing under that gaze. 200, Blackwood repeated, his voice oily with greed. "Do I hear 250? 225, someone called. 300, Crow countered immediately, his voice sharp, a challenge, a warning. The crowd fell quieter. $300 was more than most men in Silver Creek made in 8 months of hard labor. The silence stretched. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Crow was going to win. She was going to become his property, his third wife. She would not survive him, any better than the first 2 had. Then a voice cut through the afternoon heat. Deep, measured, with an edge like a blade drawn slow from its sheath. $425. Cash. The crowd went silent as death itself. Clara's head snapped toward the back of the gathering. A man stood there, partially obscured by shadow, tall, easily over 6 feet, dusty brown hat pulled low, work clothes that spoke of honest labor rather than wealth. But his bearing said something else entirely. There was a stillness to him, the kind of stillness that came from absolute certainty, from knowing exactly how dangerous you were, and having no need to prove it. He stepped forward into the light, and Clara saw him clearly. 36 years old, she would learn later. Dark hair threaded with premature silver, eyes the color of winter steel. A scar ran along his left cheekbone, a white line against sun-darkened skin. His jaw was set. His hand rested casual but ready on the Colt revolver holstered at his hip. Everything about him said soldier, cavalry maybe, or a man who had seen enough of death to recognize it at a distance and treat it with respect. Silas Crow turned, and for the first time, Clara saw him look uncertain. "Mackenzie." He said the name like a curse. "You don't need a wife. You already had one." The stranger, Mackenzie, moved with that same unhurried grace, each step deliberate. He stopped 10 feet from Crow. I'm not buying a wife, Crow. I'm buying a housekeeper. Are you? The question hung in the air, pointed, accusatory. Crow's face darkened. 450? Mackenzie's expression never changed. 475, and that's my final word on it. His gaze swept the crowd, and there was something in those cold eyes that made grown men look away. Anyone bids higher, I'll remember your face. It was not a threat, it was a promise. A statement of fact delivered with the same weight a judge might use when pronouncing sentence. No one else spoke. Clara could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, could hear the distant lowing of cattle, the creak of the platform beneath her feet. Blackwood licked his lips, his eyes gleamed. $475. He would walk away from this transaction a rich man. $475 to Mr. Cole Mackenzie, going once. He paused for effect. Going twice. Another pause. His gavel rose. Sold! The crack of wood on wood echoed like a coffin lid closing. Clara's legs nearly gave way. She caught herself on the wooden railing. $475. Why would anyone pay that much for a housekeeper? What did this man, this Mackenzie, actually want from her? Because men did not spend that kind of money out of kindness. They spent it because they expected a return on investment. She watched him approach the platform, watched him count out bills from a worn leather wallet. 47 $10 notes and one $5 note, crisp and clean, passed from his calloused hands to Blackwood's pudgy fingers. The transaction took less than a minute. Her life, sold. Her future, purchased. Mackenzie did not look at her during the exchange, did not acknowledge her at all, simply tucked his wallet away, touched the brim of his hat to Blackwood, and turned toward a wagon hitched to two sturdy horses at the edge of the square. His voice carried back, flat and emotionless. "Get in!" Clara descended the platform on shaking legs. The crowd parted before her, but she felt their eyes following, branding her skin. The whispers started before she had taken 3 steps. Whore, bought woman, property. She lifted her chin higher and walked through them like walking through smoke. The wagon was well made, the horses healthy, signs of a man who took care of his possessions. The thought made Clara's stomach turn. Was that all she was now? Another possession to be maintained? She climbed onto the bench seat. Mackenzie waited until she was settled before clicking his tongue at the horses. The wagon lurched forward. Silver Creek began to fall away behind them, the crooked buildings, the dusty main street, the auction platform where her old life had ended. She watched it disappear and felt nothing. That place had taken everything from her. Whatever waited ahead could not possibly be worse. They rode in silence for an hour. The landscape shifted from scrubby flatland to rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and pine. The air smelled of dry grass and distant mountains. Clara's hands twisted in her lap, and she tried not to think about what might happen when they reached wherever they were going. Tried not to imagine those cold eyes turning warm with unwanted intentions. Finally, Mackenzie spoke. "Name's Cole Mackenzie." He did not look at her, just kept his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "I own a ranch 15 miles north of Silver Creek. Been running cattle for 10 years. I have 2 children, twins, boy and a girl, 6 years old. Their mother died 3 years ago." Clara glanced at him, surprised by the blunt recitation of facts. His profile could have been carved from granite. No emotion showed on his face. But something in his voice, just barely detectable, a fracture in the stone. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly. The words felt inadequate. But what else could you say to a stranger's grief? "I need someone to care for them," Mackenzie continued, still not looking at her. "I've had 3 housekeepers since my wife passed. None lasted more than 3 months." "Why not?" The question slipped out before Clara could stop it. For the first time, Mackenzie's mouth twitched. Almost a smile, but not quite. Too bitter for that. Because they don't want someone to replace their mother. They want their real mother back. And I can't give them that. The rawness in that admission caught Clara off guard. This man, this soldier with his cold eyes and his gun, he was broken in the same way she was broken. Both of them carved hollow by loss. Both of them just trying to survive the weight of days that refused to end. Silence fell again. But it felt different now, less hostile, more like two wounded animals sharing space in the same den, neither quite trusting, but willing to tolerate each other's presence. "If you do well," Mackenzie said after another mile had passed, "you'll have $15 a month, your own room, 3 meals a day. If you don't work out, I'll find you a position somewhere else."
Not with Crow.
"But you can't stay if it's not working." "And if I want to leave?" Clara heard herself ask. Mackenzie finally turned his head, and those winter eyes met hers fully for the first time. "Then you leave. I don't keep prisoners, Miss Hayes. Whatever I paid for you, consider it settling your father's debts. You're not bound to me. You're free to walk away any time you choose." Clara stared at him, searching for the lie, for the catch. Men like Silas Crow, they lied, smooth as silk. They promised freedom and delivered chains. But Mackenzie's face showed nothing but tired honesty, the face of a man too exhausted by life to bother with deception. "I don't understand," Clara said slowly. "You paid $475. That's not just settling debts. That's more than a year's wages for most men. Why?" Mackenzie's jaw tightened. He looked back at the road. "Because Crow wanted you. And whatever Silas Crow wants, I make sure he doesn't get."
"Our ranches share a border. We've been at war for 5 years over water rights, grazing land, everything. Call it strategy. Call it spite. Either way, you're better off with me than with him. That much I can promise." The truth of it settled into Clara's bones. She had not been rescued. She had been a move in a game between two powerful men, a pawn shifted across the board. But even pawns, she supposed, preferred certain players to others. And Mackenzie, for all his coldness, for all his tactical motivations, he had at least offered her honesty. That was more than most men gave. The ranch appeared as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. It was larger than Clara had expected, a sprawling 2-story house with a wraparound porch, several barns in good repair, a corral filled with horses, a bunkhouse where ranch hands must sleep. Chickens scattered as the wagon rolled past. A dog came running up, barking excitedly, until Mackenzie told it to hush in a voice that brooked no argument.
Everything looked well maintained, cared for, the signs of a man who worked hard and demanded the same from those around him. But there was a weariness to the place too, a sense of too much space and not enough life to fill it. Mackenzie brought the wagon to a stop near the house. He climbed down, his movements efficient and practiced. Then he called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Sophie! Tommy! Come here!" The front door banged open, and 2 small figures came tumbling out onto the porch. They stopped at the top of the steps and stared at Clara with identical pairs of blue eyes set in sun-freckled faces. The girl wore a dress that had seen better days, torn at the hem and missing 2 buttons. The boy's trousers were patched at both knees. Both of them had wheat blonde hair that hung wild and uncombed. Both were barefoot, despite the cooling evening air.
And both looked at Clara with an expression she recognized all too well. Suspicion. Guardedness. The look of children who had been hurt too many times and learned not to trust easily. Mackenzie's voice gentled just slightly. "This is Miss Hayes. She'll be staying with us. You'll treat her with respect." The boy, Tommy, crossed his arms over his thin chest. "The last lady cried," he announced flatly. No emotion in his voice, just stating facts. The girl, Sophie, nodded in agreement. Her voice was higher than her brother's, but it had steel underneath the sweetness. "The one before that ran away in the middle of the night. We could hear her leaving through our window." Mackenzie's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just waited. Clara looked at these 2 fierce little creatures, these twins who had lost their mother and watched stranger after stranger try to take her place, who had learned to fight back the only way children knew how, by driving them away before they could leave on their own. She climbed down from the wagon, her body stiff from the long ride. She walked toward the porch, and the twins tensed, ready to flee or fight, whichever proved necessary. But instead of going to them, Clara stopped at the bottom step, and then slowly, deliberately, she knelt, put herself at their level, Let them tower over her for a moment instead of the other way around. "My name is Clara," she said quietly. "I don't cry easily, and I don't run. But I need to know something. Why do you want the housekeepers to leave?" The twins exchanged a glance, some silent conversation passing between them, the way it does with twins who share more than just a birthday. Tommy's arms uncrossed slowly. His lower lip trembled before he caught it between his teeth. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Because they're not Mama." The words hit Clara like a fist to the chest. All the air left her lungs at once.
She knew that pain. She had lived it herself. The aching absence, the hole that could never be filled because the person who belonged there was gone forever. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. "Not yet. Not here." "No," she said, and her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "I'm not your Mama. Nobody can be. Your Mama was yours and yours alone. I'm just Clara. Is that enough?" Silence. The evening wind moved through the pines. Somewhere a cow lowed. The dog whined softly, sensing the weight of the moment. Sophie's face crumpled, just for a second, before she pulled it back together. Tommy's eyes filled with tears he was too proud to shed. And Cole Mackenzie, standing by the wagon, watching this woman he had bought, kneel in the dust before his children and offer them something none of the others had, honesty without pretense. He felt something in his chest he had thought died 3 years ago when he lowered Sarah into the ground. "Okay," Sophie said finally. "We'll see." It was not acceptance, not yet. But it was not rejection either. It was the beginning of possibility. Clara pushed herself to her feet. Mackenzie gestured toward the house. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the left. Get yourself settled. There's stew from yesterday that needs warming for supper." The twins turned and ran back inside, their footsteps thundering on the wooden floorboards. Mackenzie followed, pausing only to look back at Clara one more time. Something in his expression had softened imperceptibly, but he said nothing, just went inside and let the door close behind him. Clara stood alone in the gathering dusk. She looked up at the house that was supposed to be her home now, at the life she had been bought into like livestock at auction. And for the first time in 3 days, since her father had died and the creditors had come, she felt the smallest ember of something that might, eventually, become hope. She picked up her single small bag, everything she owned in the world, and she walked into the house. The interior was dim and cluttered, dust on most surfaces, dishes stacked in the wash basin. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold and empty. The furniture looked handmade but sturdy. It smelled like wood smoke and old coffee, and the particular kind of loneliness that came from too many empty rooms. She found the stairs and climbed. The second door on the left opened into a small room. Narrow bed, chest of drawers, window looking out over the darkening hills. Someone had left a pitcher of water and a clean towel on the dresser. Small kindnesses in a hard world. Clara set down her bag, sat on the edge of the bed, and for exactly 1 minute she let herself shake. Let her body process the terror of the day. The auction block, the slap, the strange, cold man who had bought her for reasons she still did not fully understand. The 2 fierce children who hated her before they even knew her. Then she pulled herself together, smoothed her dress, splashed water on her face to wash away the blood and dust, and she went downstairs to warm the stew. Because that was what you did when the world broke you. You kept moving. You did the next necessary thing, and the thing after that, until somehow, impossibly, you found yourself still alive, still standing, still capable of something that might eventually resemble living. In the kitchen, she found the pot of stew, still good despite being a day old. She lit the stove, something that took 3 tries because her hands were still shaking slightly. While it heated, she began washing the dishes piled in the basin. Soap and hot water and the simple rhythm of labor. The kind of work that quieted the mind. She heard small footsteps on the stairs, turned to find both twins standing in the doorway, watching her with those suspicious blue eyes. "Are you hungry?" Clara asked. They nodded in unison. "Then sit. It'll be ready in a few minutes." They sat, still watching, still waiting for her to prove herself a liar, like all the adults before her who had promised to stay and then left.
Clara ladled stew into bowls, set them on the table with fresh bread she found in the pantry, poured milk into 2 cups. Then she stepped back. "Eat. I'll call your father." She found Mackenzie in what must be his study, a small room lined with books and papers. He sat at a desk, staring at nothing in particular. The lamp beside him cast harsh shadows across his face, making the scar stand out white and stark. "Supper's ready," Clara said from the doorway. He looked up, surprised, as if he had forgotten she existed. "Already?" "The twins are at the table." Something in his expression shifted again, that same imperceptible softening. He stood, and Clara noticed for the first time how tired he looked, how the weight of 3 years of single parenthood and ranch management and grief had carved lines into a face that might once have been young. They ate in near silence. The twins focused on their food with single-minded intensity. Mackenzie ate mechanically, barely tasting anything. Clara picked at her bowl, her stomach still too tight with nerves to manage much. After the meal, Mackenzie told the twins to get ready for bed. They obeyed without argument, which suggested a routine long established. He followed them upstairs, and Clara heard the low murmur of his voice, the higher tones of the children, the sounds of a family going through the motions of bedtime. She cleaned the dishes, banked the fire in the stove, put away the leftover bread, the simple domestic tasks that were supposed to define her existence here, property earning her keep. When Mackenzie came back down, he found her standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the star-filled sky. Montana stars, impossibly bright in the absence of city lights, beautiful enough to hurt. "They're asleep," he said quietly. Clara nodded, not turning around. "They're good children." "They are." A pause. "You handled that well. Out there." Kneeling down, none of the others thought to do that. "I remember being a child no one listened to," Clara said softly. "I remember how it felt to be small and powerless and scared. I won't forget that just because I'm grown now." Silence. Then Mackenzie's boots against the floor as he moved closer. Not threatening, just present. "Thank you," he said, "for staying, for trying. I didn't have much choice. You have more choice than you think." His voice held an unexpected gentleness. "You could have run the moment we arrived, could have stolen a horse and tried your luck on the road, could have made this hard. You didn't." Clara finally turned to face him. "Why did you really bid on me, Mr. Mackenzie? And please don't tell me it was just to spite Silas Crow. $475 is too much for spite." He held her gaze, and for a long moment she thought he would not answer. Then he sighed, a sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep and tired in his chest. "I saw your face," he said, "on that platform. You were terrified. But you didn't beg, didn't cry. You just stood there like a soldier facing execution, accepting what you couldn't change, but refusing to surrender your dignity." He paused. "My children need someone strong, not someone who'll crumble the first time things get hard. I looked at you and I saw strength. So yes, I paid too much. But if you're what I think you are, if you're as strong as you looked standing up there, then you're worth every penny." Clara's throat tightened. No one had called her strong in her entire life. She had always been the drunk's daughter, the burden, the girl to be pitied or ignored. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this," she admitted. "None of us know until we try." Mackenzie stepped back, creating distance again, professional, appropriate. "Get some rest, Miss Hayes. Tomorrow starts early on a ranch." He left her standing in the kitchen, and Clara heard him climb the stairs, heard a door close. She waited a few more minutes, listening to the house settle into night sounds, creaking boards, wind against windows, the distant howl of a coyote somewhere in the hills. Then she went upstairs to her small room, lay down on the narrow bed, fully clothed, because she did not trust this safety yet, did not trust that she would not wake to find everything a lie. Through the thin walls, she could hear the twins in the next room, Sophie's voice whispering, "She seems okay." Tommy's response, barely audible, "Do you think she'll stay?" "Nobody stays, Tommy. Nobody ever stays." Clara's heart broke for the 1,000th time that day. These children who had learned too young that people left, that love was temporary, that nothing good lasted. She lay in the dark and made a promise to them, even though they could not hear her, even though she did not yet know if she could keep it. I will stay. As long as you'll have me, as long as I draw breath, I will not be another person who abandons you. It was the first lie she told in that house, because Clara did not know yet that it would turn out to be the truest thing she ever said. Outside, the Montana night stretched vast and full of stars, and in a house that had been hollow for 3 years, 5 broken souls tried to sleep, none of them knowing yet that they had just found each other. That the auction block had not been an ending, it had been a beginning. The first test came at breakfast on Clara's first full day at the Mackenzie Ranch. She had risen before dawn, as was her habit from years of caring for an unreliable father. The house was still dark and quiet when she made her way downstairs, her feet barely making a sound on the wooden steps. In the kitchen, she found the supplies she needed: flour, salt, sugar, butter that had been kept cool in the spring house overnight. She set about making biscuits, the kind her grandmother had taught her before the old woman passed. Simple food, but made with care. The coffee she brewed strong and black, the way working men seemed to prefer it. She heard Cole's footsteps on the stairs just as the biscuits came out of the oven, golden and perfect. He appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day's work, his hat in hand. His eyes registered surprise at finding breakfast ready. A flicker of something that might have been approval crossed his face before the careful blankness returned. "Morning," he said, sitting at the table. Clara poured coffee into a thick ceramic mug and set it before him. "Good morning, Mr. Mackenzie." He took a sip, his face contorted. He spat the coffee back into the mug with a curse. "This is salted." Clara turned from the stove, genuinely confused. She had been careful. She knew she had been careful. But then she caught the flash of movement in the doorway. Sophie, standing there in her nightgown, watching, waiting. A small, triumphant smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Understanding dawned. Clara walked to the counter and picked up the sugar bowl. She opened it, looked inside, then calmly dumped the entire contents into the slop bucket. The child had mixed salt into the sugar. A clever trick. One designed to make Clara look incompetent, to give Cole a reason to send her away. Clara refilled the sugar bowl from the pantry supply, made fresh coffee, and brought it to Cole without a word of explanation or complaint. This time, when he drank, it was perfect. Sophie's smile faded. Clara met the child's eyes and said nothing. No accusation, no anger, just a calm acknowledgement that she understood the game being played, that she would not react the way Sophie expected, that she would not break so easily. The second test came that evening. Clara had spent the day learning the rhythms of the ranch, washing clothes in the big copper tub, mending torn trousers and dresses with patches cut from old flour sacks, preparing a midday meal for the ranch hands, 12 men who ate with the focused intensity of those who worked from dawn until dusk under an unforgiving sun. She met Miguel Santos, the foreman, a Mexican man in his middle 40s, with kind eyes and a quiet competence that spoke of decades spent reading land and animals and men. By late afternoon she was ready to collect eggs from the hen house, but when she approached the small wooden structure, she found the door wide open. 35 chickens had escaped, scattered across the yard and into the nearby fields. It would take hours to round them up, hours of work at the end of an already exhausting day. Clara stood there for a long moment, her shoulders sagging with fatigue. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. 2 hours later, with the sun setting in violent shades of orange and purple, she finally cornered the last stubborn hen and returned it to the coop. Her dress was filthy, her arms were scratched from chasing birds through brambles, her feet ached. She turned and found Tommy watching from the barn entrance. He had been there the whole time, she realized, waiting for her to scream, to cry, to storm into the house and demand that the children be punished. Instead, Clara walked over to him, sat down on the fence rail, breathing hard. The boy tensed, ready to run. "That was impressive," Clara said, her voice tired but genuine. "How did you manage to open the latch? I struggle with that barn door every morning." Tommy stared at her, clearly thrown by the response. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I just pulled the pin out," he finally mumbled. "Smart. Would you show me tomorrow? I need to learn." Something in the child's face shifted. The wariness remained, but beneath it, a tiny seed of curiosity had been planted. "Okay," he said quietly. The third test came the following morning. Clara woke to find her shoes missing. She searched her room thoroughly, then the hallway, then downstairs. Nothing. She had only the one pair, sturdy boots that had belonged to her father before his death. Without them, she would have to work barefoot, which on a ranch full of nails and splinters and God knew what else was asking for injury. But she had no choice. She wrapped her feet in strips of cloth, torn from an old petticoat, and went about her chores. By noon, her feet were bleeding, small cuts and scrapes that stung with every step. She bit her lip against the pain and kept working, kept moving. Because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and she could not afford to feel right now. Sophie found her in the kitchen that afternoon, preparing supper. The girl stood in the doorway, holding Clara's boots. Her face was conflicted, guilty, uncertain. "They're under my bed," Sophie said, her voice small. Clara turned, saw the shoes, and felt relief wash over her. "Thank you, Sophie. That was a good hiding spot." "Aren't you mad?" The question came out plaintive, almost desperate. Clara knelt, ignoring the protest from her injured feet. She looked the child in the eye. "Would being mad bring them back faster?" The others yelled. They said we were demons. "You're not demons." Clara's voice was firm, absolute. "You're hurt. There's a difference." Sophie's lower lip trembled. Her eyes filled with tears, she furiously blinked away. "I wanted you to leave," she whispered, "like the others." "I know. But you didn't." "No, I didn't." The girl stood there for another moment, wrestling with something too big for a 6-year-old to carry alone. Then she turned and ran, her footsteps disappearing up the stairs. That evening, Clara found a small bouquet of wildflowers on her pillow, daisies and black-eyed Susans tied together with a piece of twine. Tommy's peace offering, given without words, because the boy had not yet found the courage for words. Clara sat on her bed and held those flowers and cried for the first time since arriving at the ranch. Not from sadness, from something more complicated, something that felt dangerously close to hope. A week passed, then 2. The tests continued, but they grew less vicious, more playful. Sophie hid Clara's apron instead of her shoes. Tommy put a frog in her wash water instead of releasing livestock. Small acts of mischief from children learning to trust, learning to play instead of fight. Clara met each challenge with patience, with humor when she could find it, with honesty when she could not. She never lied to them, never made promises she might not keep, never tried to be someone she was not. And slowly, like frost melting under spring sun, the children began to soften. It was Miguel who named what was happening. Clara found him in the kitchen late one night, long after the twins had been put to bed. He had come in for coffee, a habit of his when checking on night watch rotation. He poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter, studying her with those knowing eyes. "You handle los pequeños well, Miss Clara, better than the others." Clara looked up from the bread dough she was kneading for tomorrow's breakfast. "They just need someone who listens." "Sí, but more than this." Miguel took a thoughtful sip. "You do not try to be La Señora Sarah. You are just yourself. The others, they wanted to replace her. You honor her by being different." The observation struck Clara silent. She had not thought of it that way, had not realized that her very inability to compete with a ghost was what made her acceptable. "El patron, Mr. Cole," Miguel continued, his voice dropping lower. "He is a good man. But since Sarah died, he is hollow inside. The children, they feel this. They push to see if anyone will stay, to see if anyone is strong enough." "He loved her very much," Clara said softly, shaping the dough into loaves. "See, and Silas Crow knows this." Miguel's face grew serious. "Warning. Be careful, señorita. Crow does not forget losing the bid. He watches this ranch, always watching. And now he watches you most of all." A chill ran down Clara's spine, despite the warmth of the kitchen. What would he do? Whatever it takes to hurt Cole. And now you are here, you and the children.
3 new ways to make him bleed. Miguel set down his cup. Lock your door at night, Miss Clara, and if you see Crow's men on the property, you run. You hide those children, and you run.
Comprende?
Clara nodded, her throat tight. She had known, abstractly, that she had been pulled into something larger than herself. But hearing it stated plainly made it real, made it dangerous. After Miguel left, she stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, a man she had never wronged wanted to use her as a weapon against the man who had saved her. The thought made her feel small, powerless, like standing on that auction block all over again. But she was not on the block anymore. She was here. She had a locked door and a roof and 2 children who were starting to trust her. That had to count for something. What Clara did not know was that Cole Mackenzie stood in his study at that very moment, watching her through his own window. He had been watching her for days now, watching the way she moved through his house like she belonged there, the way she knelt in the garden dirt to show Tommy how to identify weeds from vegetables, the way she sat with Sophie every morning, braiding the girl's wild hair while singing songs in a voice that was not beautiful, but was warm, real, human. He watched her teaching his children to make biscuits, flour dusting all 3 of them, laughter spilling out of the kitchen for the first time in 3 years. He watched Sophie kiss Clara's cheek goodnight, a casual gesture of affection that made his chest ache with something he could not name. She was good with them, better than good. She treated them like small people with valid feelings instead of problems to be managed. She listened when they spoke. She admitted when she did not know things. She never promised more than she could deliver. And his children, his fierce, wounded, testing children, were falling in love with her. And so was he. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He was noticing her. The curve of her neck when she bent over mending. The sound of her laugh when Tommy said something unexpectedly funny. The way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, which was happening more often now. The strength in her small frame. The gentleness in her capable hands. He could not afford to notice these things. She was young, 18 to his 36. She had been bought. How could he possibly pursue feelings for a woman he had purchased like livestock? What kind of man would that make him? But the feelings were there regardless of his permission, growing, strengthening, becoming harder to ignore with each passing day. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Cole found himself on the porch. The night air was cooling, a relief after the day's heat. He stood at the railing, looking out at his land, trying to organize thoughts that refused to be organized. The door opened behind him. Clara stepped out, clearly not expecting him to be there. She froze, half in shadow, half in the lamplight spilling from inside. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude."
I'll go back inside.
"No." The word came out sharper than he intended. He softened his voice. "Stay. You're not intruding." She moved to the opposite end of the porch, maintaining careful distance, professional distance, the distance between employer and employee. But Cole found himself wanting to close that gap. Found himself wondering what would happen if he did. "They like you," he said instead. "Safe territory. Sophie and Tommy. They've stopped trying to drive you away. They're just testing me, making sure I'm real. They tested the others. The others failed." Cole turned to face her fully. "You passed." Clara was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "I just treat them like people, not like problems that need solving." That's what Sarah did. The name hung in the air between them, the ghost that lived in every room of this house. Cole saw Clara flinch slightly at the comparison, saw her pull into herself. "I'm not trying to be her," Clara said, and there was something raw in her voice, vulnerable. "I know." Cole took a step closer, drawn by instinct he could not name. "That's why it works." Another silence, this one charged with things neither of them knew how to say. Cole watched emotions flicker across Clara's face. Uncertainty, something that might have been longing, fear. He wanted to tell her that he saw her, really saw her, not as the girl from the auction block, not as the housekeeper, but as Clara, brave and patient and stronger than she knew.
He wanted to tell her that watching her with his children made him remember what it felt like to hope, to imagine a future that held more than just survival. But the words would not come. Years of carefully controlled emotion had left him unable to access the language of feeling. So he just stood there, looking at her in the lamplight, and hoped she could read in his eyes what he could not say out loud. Clara broke first.
I should go inside. Morning comes early.
Wait. He did not know what he was going to say until he said it. Thank you. For staying. For trying with them. I didn't have much choice, Clara said, but there was no bitterness in it, just fact. You have more choice than you think. Cole's voice was rough, honest. You could have made this harder, could have been unkind, could have seen them as burdens. You didn't. They're not burdens. They're children who hurt. I remember how that feels. The admission hung between them, two people shaped by loss, two people trying to build something from the ruins of what they had been. Cole wanted to reach for her, wanted to close the distance, wanted to touch her face and tell her that he was starting to understand that the auction had not been about spite or strategy. It had been about this, about her, about the way she fit into the broken spaces of his life, like she had been made for them. But he did not reach, did not touch,
just nodded and stepped back, releasing her from the weight of the moment.
Clara fled inside, and Cole stood alone on the porch for another hour, staring at nothing and feeling everything. Later that night, after the house had settled into sleep, Clara lay in her narrow bed and listened to the twins in the next room. Their voices carried through the thin walls. Sophie's clearer, Tommy's softer. She's different, Sophie was saying. Different how? Tommy asked. She doesn't try to be Mama, she's just Clara. A pause. Then Tommy's small voice, barely audible. Do you think she'll stay? Clara held her breath, waiting for the answer. I don't know, Sophie whispered, but I hope so. I really hope so. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth to muffle the sob that wanted to escape. These children, these beautiful wounded children, they were letting her in, trusting her with the tender parts of themselves they had learned to guard so carefully. And Cole,
the way he had looked at her tonight, like she mattered, like she was more than just hired help. The intensity in those winter blue eyes had made her heart stutter in her chest. She could not afford these feelings, could not let herself hope for more than what she had been given. She was the bought woman, the auctioned girl. Whatever kindness Cole showed her was probably just gratitude for her work with his children, nothing more. But in the darkness of her room, with the sound of the twins breathing, evening out into sleep, Clara let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like to belong here, not as an employee, but as family. The fantasy was dangerous, beautiful, terrifying. She pushed it away and tried to sleep. In the barn, Cole sat with Miguel, supposedly checking on a mare that was due to foal any day. But really, Cole just needed to talk, needed to say out loud the things that were eating him alive. Miguel, I'm noticing her. The foreman grinned, unsurprised. Finalmente, about time, amigo.
No, it's wrong. Sarah has only been gone 3 years, and Clara, she was bought. I paid money for her. How can I possibly pursue anything when the foundation is so wrong? Miguel's face grew serious. Cole, listen to me. You gave her freedom, choice. That is more than most men would do. She stays because she wants to, because she loves those children. Maybe because she is starting to love you too, though she does not know it yet. And if I ruin it, if I make her feel obligated, if she thinks she owes me something, then you talk to her like a human being. You ask her what she wants. You give her the power to say no. Miguel gripped Cole's shoulder. Sarah would not want you to be alone forever. She would want you happy. She would want those children to have a mother who loves them. And Miss Clara, she loves them already. I see it. Cole's throat tightened. I don't know how to do this, how to feel again.
I buried that part of myself with Sarah. Then you dig it back up. You learn again. You are not dead, Cole. You are just scared. And that is okay. But do not let fear steal what could be good. Miguel stood, patting the mare's neck. But be careful, amigo. Crow is still watching.
If he sees that you care for her, truly care, he will use it. He will hurt her to hurt you. So you protect her, you prepare, and when the time comes, you fight. After Miguel left, Cole sat in the hay-strewn barn and thought about the woman sleeping in his house, about the way she had knelt before his children, about the strength in her, despite everything the world had done to break her, about the possibility of a future that held more than just going through motions. He thought about Sarah, too, about the love they had shared, about the promise he had made to himself that he would never love again, because losing her had nearly destroyed him. But Sarah was gone, and Clara was here,
and his children were laughing again. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to let himself hope for more than mere survival. The decision settled into his bones like the rightness of dawn after a long night. He would wait. He would be patient. He would give Clara time to find her footing, to know that she was valued not for what she cost, but for who she was. And when the time was right, when she knew beyond doubt that she had a choice, he would tell her the truth. That somewhere between the auction block and this moment, he had fallen in love with her. But that conversation would wait, because rushing would ruin everything. And Cole Mackenzie had learned patience from years of working land that gave up its harvest slowly, grudgingly, only to those willing to wait. So he would wait, and he would hope, and he would protect what was growing between them with everything he had, even if it meant facing down Silas Crow and whatever hell the man was planning. Because some things, Cole was learning, were worth fighting for, and Clara Hayes was one of them. October came to Montana Territory with a vengeance that year, and it brought no rain. The creek that ran through the Mackenzie Ranch, fed by mountain springs that had never failed in living memory, began to shrink. Day by day, inch by inch, the water level dropped until the rocks along the bottom showed through like bones beneath skin. The cattle grew restless, crowding the diminishing pools, their ribs starting to show through their hides. Cole stood at the creek bed with Miguel on a cool morning 6 weeks after Clara's arrival, watching the thin trickle of water that should have been a robust flow. His jaw was set in that way Clara had learned meant he was deeply worried, but would not show it. "Boss, we lose 2 inches every day," Miguel said, his voice grim. "At this rate, 2 weeks and we have nothing. The cattle, they will die. Creeks never run dry, not even in the drought of 71. Cole crouched, ran his hand through the shallow water. "Something's wrong." "See, I think someone makes it wrong." The 2 men rowed upstream, following the creek toward the mountains. What they found confirmed Miguel's suspicion. A crude dam had been built from logs and stones, diverting the water east toward Crowland. The construction was new, maybe a week old, hidden in a narrow canyon where nobody from Mackenzie Ranch would think to look. Cole's face went cold, hard as the granite mountains rising behind them. Crow. They rowed to the border between the 2 properties, that invisible line that had been fought over for 5 years. Silas Crow was waiting there, as if he had known they would come. He sat on his horse, with 4 armed men flanking him, a smile on his face that made Clara's warning about wolves seem tame by comparison. "Mackenzie," Crow said, his voice carrying across the distance. "Something troubling you this fine morning?" Cole's hand rested on his revolver. "Tear down that dam. Now." "What dam would that be? I see only natural water flow, following the path God intended." "You diverted my water. That's theft. It's illegal." Crow leaned forward in his saddle, and his smile widened. "Prove it. And good luck getting Sheriff Morrison to help you. My money funds his campaigns. My influence keeps him elected. You're alone in this, Mackenzie, just like you're alone in everything else these days." "This is war, Crow." "No, friend. This is business. Smart business." Crow's eyes glinted with malice. "And speaking of business, how is your new housekeeper working out? Miss Hayes, wasn't it? Pretty little thing. Worth every penny of those $475, I imagine." The threat was clear. The possessiveness in how Crow said Clara's name made Cole's blood run cold and hot simultaneously. "Finish that sentence," Cole said quietly, "and I will kill you where you sit." Crow laughed,
but his hand moved closer to his own weapon. "Easy now. I'm just making conversation, just saying it would be a shame if something happened to Miss Hayes. Accidents occur on isolated ranches. Pretty women can disappear, children too. Such a dangerous world we live in." Miguel had to physically grab Cole's arm to stop him from drawing. The two men locked eyes across the border, and in that moment, both knew this conflict would end in blood. The only question was whose and when. They rode back to the ranch in tense silence. Cole's mind was already working through options, none of them good. Without water, he would have to sell half his herd at a loss or watch them die. Either way, he would be weakened, vulnerable, exactly what Crow wanted. What Cole did not know was that worse news waited at home. They crested the final hill and saw the wagon in front of the house. Not one of theirs. A fancy rig with polished brass fittings, the kind that carried town people who had never worked a day of honest labor. Standing on the porch was Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, dressed in black silk despite the afternoon heat, looking like a crow come to pick over carrion. Beside her stood Sheriff Morrison, hat in hand, his face apologetic but resigned. And in the sheriff's other hand was an envelope bearing the seal of the territorial court. Cole dismounted and walked toward them, with the feeling of a man approaching his own execution. Clara stood in the doorway behind Mrs. Whitmore, her face pale. The twins were nowhere to be seen, probably sent upstairs when the visitors arrived. "Mr. Mackenzie," Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice clipped and cold. "How fortunate that you've returned. The sheriff has something for you." Morrison stepped forward, clearly unhappy with his task. "Cole, I'm sorry. I'm serving you with notice of a custody hearing. Mrs. Whitmore and 12 other women of the town have filed a petition with Judge Brennan, questioning your fitness as guardian to Sophie and Tommy." The words hit Cole like bullets. "What?" Mrs. Whitmore's lips thinned into something approximating satisfaction. "You brought a woman of ill repute into your home, Mr. Mackenzie. A woman who was sold at public auction like livestock, like a slave. How dare you expose Sarah's children to such moral corruption?" "Clara is not corrupt. She's their caregiver. She's good with them." "She was bought." Mrs. Whitmore spoke each word like a nail being driven into wood. "Purchased? What kind of example does that set? What kind of woman allows herself to be sold? And what kind of man buys a woman and expects decent people to accept her in their community?" Cole's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Get off my land!" "The hearing is in 4 weeks," Morrison continued quickly, clearly wanting this over. "Judge Brennan will review the children's living situation. If the court rules that the home environment is unsuitable, Sophie and Tommy could be removed and placed with a more appropriate guardian." "Appropriate guardian?" Cole repeated. "You mean you, Eleanor? You want my children?" "I want what's best for them, what Sarah would have wanted. She was my dearest friend, and she would be horrified to see what you've done. Bringing that woman here, letting her touch her children, letting her sleep under the same roof, it's an abomination." Cole took a step toward Mrs. Whitmore, and something in his face made her step back despite herself. "My children are happy for the first time in 3 years. They're laughing again. They're healing, and you want to take that away because you don't approve of how it happened." "The law will decide," Mrs. Whitmore said, recovering her composure. "Not you, not anymore." She swept past him toward her wagon, and Morrison followed, still apologetic but bound by duty. They drove away, leaving Cole standing in his own yard with the official notice in his hand and his entire world crumbling around him. Clara appeared in the doorway. Her face was devastated. "I heard everything. Clara, I need you to understand that this is not your fault." But Clara was already shaking her head, already backing into the house. "I'm destroying your life, your children, everything. I have to leave." She ran upstairs, and Cole heard her moving around in her room, opening drawers, the sound of her bag being packed. He took the stairs 2 at a time and found her frantically stuffing her few possessions into the same small bag she had arrived with. "What are you doing?" "Leaving. I should have left weeks ago. I should never have stayed. They're going to take Sophie and Tommy because of me, because I'm here, because I'm what I am." "You're not going anywhere." Cole grabbed her shoulders, perhaps harder than he meant to, But he was desperate, terrified. "Clara, stop." "They'll take your children," she was crying now, the first time he had seen her truly break. "Because I was sold, because I'm nobody, because I'm worth nothing. I won't let you lose them because of me. You leaving won't fix this. It will make it worse. Sophie and Tommy, they need you now, more than ever." "I'm not worth this. I'm not worth losing everything." Her voice cracked. "I was auctioned. I was bought like cattle. What am I supposed to be worth after that?" Cole did something he had not done since Sarah died. He acted on instinct rather than careful thought. He cupped Clara's face in his calloused hands and made her look at him. "You are worth everything," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "To them, to me." The last two words hung in the air. Clara's eyes widened, her breath caught. "Please," Cole said, and the word cost him. "Stay. Fight with me. We'll face this together." Clara searched his face, looking for the lie, for the trap. But she found only raw honesty, only a man who had locked his heart away for 3 years and was now offering her a glimpse inside. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Cole pulled her into an embrace that was neither employer to employee nor anything that could be easily named. Just two people, clinging to each other against a world that wanted to tear them apart. Clara's tears soaked into his shirt. His chin rested on top of her head, and for those few moments, the fear receded enough to breathe. That evening, Cole called a council of war. They gathered around the dining table. Cole, Clara, Miguel, Pete Harrison, the oldest ranch hand, who had worked for Cole's father and knew every inch of the property. The lamplight cast harsh shadows across worried faces. "We have 2 problems," Cole said, laying out the situation with military precision. "First, Crow has cut our water. Without it, the cattle die, or we sell at ruinous loss. Either way, we're financially crippled. Second, the custody hearing in 4 weeks. If we lose, I lose my children, possibly forever." "We cannot win both fights," Miguel said quietly. "We must choose." "No," Clara's voice was firm. Everyone turned to look at her. "We find a way to win both. We find water, and we prove that this home is good for Sophie and Tommy." Pete, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. "Miss Clara, there might be water. Old well, dug by Cole's grandfather back in 52. It's on the east pasture. Story goes it dried up, but my father always said it was just covered over. Said the spring was still there, just hidden." "Where exactly?" Clara leaned forward, her mind already working. Pete produced a hand-drawn map, creased and faded. "Here, near the old oak. Grandfather Mackenzie marked it before he died, but nobody's looked in 30 years. Clara studied the map. Her father, before the drinking destroyed him, had taught her about water, about how it moved underground like secrets, following paths invisible to the eye. She traced the contour lines Pete had drawn. "If we dig here and here, we might hit the spring. It won't be enough for the whole herd, but it could save the breeding stock. Enough to survive until we can deal with Crow's dam." Cole stared at her. "You know geology." "My father was a prospector before he became a blacksmith, before the bottle took him. He taught me to read land for water and minerals." She looked up, and there was something fierce in her eyes. "Let me try. Let me help." Miguel grinned. "La señorita has fire. I like this." "We start digging tomorrow," Cole decided. "Clara, Miguel, Pete, and whoever else we can spare. We work in shifts. We don't stop until we find water or prove it's not there." "And the hearing?" Clara asked. "We prove that Sophie and Tommy are loved here, that they're thriving. We get character witnesses. We show Judge Brennan that what matters is not how you came here, but what you've become here." Cole's eyes met Clara's across the table. "We show him family isn't about blood or propriety. It's about choice and commitment and love." The last word settled over them like a benediction. They dug for 3 days. The October sun beat down as Clara, Miguel, Pete, and 4 other ranch hands took turns with picks and shovels. They went down 10 feet, 15 feet, hit rock and dug around it. Clara consulted Pete's map, adjusted their angle, and they kept going. Cole joined them when he could, between managing the cattle and trying to find a legal way to force Crow to restore the water. 20 feet down, on the afternoon of the third day, Pete's shovel broke through into a cavity. Water gushed up, cold and clear and impossible and perfect. The men shouted in triumph. Miguel pulled Clara into a spinning hug that lifted her off the ground. She laughed, covered in mud and sweat, and happier than she had been in years. Cole arrived at a gallop, having heard the commotion from the north pasture. He dismounted while his horse was still moving and ran to the well, saw the water, saw Clara grinning at him, filthy and radiant, and something in his chest, something that had been clenched tight for 3 years, finally loosened. He walked straight to her, the ranch hands whooping and hollering around them. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet, spinning her once before setting her down. Their faces were inches apart, mud on both of them, water soaking into their clothes. The world fell away until there was only this moment, only the two of them, and the impossible thing they had just accomplished together. "You saved us," Cole said, his voice rough. "We saved us," Clara replied. They stood there holding each other, and everyone watching knew they were witnessing something that had nothing to do with water, and everything to do with two broken people finding wholeness in each other. That night, after the twins were asleep, Cole found Clara on the porch. She stood at the railing, looking up at the stars that seemed close enough to touch in the thin mountain air. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I need to tell you something," he said. Clara tensed slightly but did not move away. "Okay. When I bid on you at that auction, I told you it was strategy. Told you it was about blocking Crow. And that was true. At first. But standing there, watching you on that platform, I saw something I hadn't expected to see." "What?" "Courage. Real courage. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be broken by it. You stood there terrified but undefeated. And I thought, my children need someone like that. Someone who knows how to survive the unsurvivable." Clara's throat tightened. "Cole." "I'm not finished." He turned to face her, and in the lamplight from inside, his eyes were fierce, honest. "Somewhere between that day and this moment, between watching you win over my children and watching you dig in the earth for water and watching you refuse to give up when everything seemed lost, I stopped seeing you as the woman from the auction. I started seeing you as Clara. Just Clara. And Clara is extraordinary. I'm not. I'm just trying to survive like everyone else. You're stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and my children love you. They call you their Clara. Sophie told me yesterday that you're teaching her to read better. Tommy asked me if you would stay forever." Cole's voice dropped lower, "And I realized I want you to. Not as hired help, not as an obligation, but as family. As someone who chooses to be here because this is where you want to be." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Cole, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Not yet. I just needed you to know, before the hearing, before whatever comes next, I needed you to know that you matter, that you're not just the woman I bought. You're the woman who saved us all." He stepped back, giving her space, giving her the power to decide what happened next. But before he could move far, Clara reached out and caught his hand, her fingers interlaced with his, small and strong and certain. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for making me believe I could be more than what happened to me." They stood there in the Montana night, hands joined, and neither spoke of the battles still ahead, the custody hearing that could rip this fragile family apart, Silas Crow and whatever vengeance he was planning, the town that judged Clara for circumstances beyond her control. All of that waited in the days to come. But for this moment, under stars that had witnessed 1,000,000 human struggles and would witness 1,000,000 more, two people who had been alone found each other. And that was enough. Inside the house, Sophie and Tommy pressed their faces to the upstairs window, watching. They could not hear the words being spoken, but they could see their father holding Miss Clara's hand, could see the way they looked at each other. "Do you think Papa loves her?" Tommy whispered. Sophie nodded slowly. "Yeah, and I think she loves him too." "Is that okay?" Is it okay to love someone who's not Mama? Sophie thought about this carefully, the way she thought about all important things. Mama would want Papa to be happy, and Clara makes him happy. She makes all of us happy. So it's okay? It's better than okay. It's good. The twins pulled back from the window and climbed into their respective beds. Tommy clutched his wooden horse. Sophie pulled her blanket up to her chin. Both of them fell asleep with the same thought running through their minds, a thought that felt like hope, like safety, like the promise of a future that held more than just survival. Maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. Maybe Miss Clara really would stay forever. And maybe, for once in their short, hard lives, the people they loved would not leave. Outside, the night deepened. The newly found well bubbled with clean water. The cattle began to settle, sensing that salvation had come. And on the porch of the Mackenzie ranch, Cole and Clara stood together, hands joined, facing toward a dawn they could not yet see, but were learning, slowly, to believe in. The war with Crow was not over. The custody battle loomed. The town's judgment had not softened. But they had water now. They had hope. They had each other. And sometimes, in the hardest times, that was enough to keep fighting. That was enough to keep believing that broken things could heal, that lost souls could find home, that love, when it came despite all reason, despite all odds, despite every logical argument against it, was the most powerful force in the world, strong enough to overcome auctions and accusations, and the cruelty of men who wanted to destroy what they could not possess. Strong enough, perhaps, to overcome anything. The attack came 3 nights after they found the well. Cole was in Silver Creek, meeting with a territorial lawyer about the custody hearing, and exploring options to force Crow to restore the diverted water. Miguel had ridden with him, leaving the ranch under the watch of Pete and one other hand, both older men, better suited to maintenance than defense. It seemed safe enough. The well had taken the immediate pressure off. The cattle were drinking again. For a few precious days, they had allowed themselves to believe the worst might be over. They were wrong. Clara was in the kitchen washing the supper dishes when she smelled smoke. Not the clean smoke of a cooking fire, something heavier, more ominous. She dried her hands and walked to the back door, and her heart stopped. The hay barn was ablaze. Flames climbed 30 feet into the October darkness, turning night into hellish orange day. The heat could be felt even from the house, a physical force that made her step back. And circling the inferno on horseback were 3 riders, their faces covered with bandanas, torches in their hands like demons from some frontier nightmare. Clara's mind went cold and clear, the way it had on the auction block. Terror was there, but underneath it ran a current of pure survival instinct. The twins. She had to protect the twins. She ran upstairs, taking steps 2 at a time, burst into their room where both children were sitting up in bed, eyes wide with fear. Sophie already knew something was wrong. That child's instincts were sharp as broken glass. "Clara, I smell smoke," Sophie said, her voice thin. "I know, baby. We need to go to the cellar. Right now. No questions." Tommy clutched his wooden horse. "Where's Papa?" "He'll be home soon, but right now I need you both to trust me. Can you do that?" They nodded. Clara grabbed blankets and shepherded them downstairs, through the kitchen, down into the root cellar that Cole had dug deep into the earth for storing vegetables through winter. It was cool and dark and safe. She settled them in the corner, wrapped in blankets, trying to keep her own terror from showing on her face. "Stay here," she commanded. "No matter what you hear, you stay here until I come get you or your father does. Understand?" "Clara, don't go back up," Sophie begged, grabbing her hand. "Stay with us." "I have to protect the house, but I promise I'll come back. I always come back." She kissed both their foreheads, tasting salt and fear, and then she climbed back up and barred the cellar door from the outside. If anyone wanted to get to those children, they would have to go through her first. Clara ran to Cole's study, where she knew he kept weapons. The rifle was there, loaded and ready, the way ranch owners kept guns in country where help was hours away. Miguel had taught her to shoot over the past weeks, patient lessons in the north pasture where her shots would not scare the cattle. She had proven a decent shot, not excellent, but adequate. She would have to hope adequate was enough. She went back outside, the rifle heavy in her hands. The barn was fully engulfed now, a total loss. Nothing to be done about that. But the riders were still there, and as she watched, one of them opened the corral gate. 50 head of cattle began streaming out, spooked by the fire and the yelling, stampeding in all directions. A stampede that would scatter them across miles of open range, taking weeks to round up if they ever were all found.
Pete appeared from the bunkhouse, shotgun in hand, but he was 70 years old and moved like it. One of the riders saw him, laughed, and fired a shot that hit the dirt at Pete's feet. The old man dove for cover behind a water trough. Clara stepped off the porch, the rifle at her shoulder. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. Everything inside her was screaming, but her hands were steady. "Leave!" she called out, her voice carrying across the chaos. "You're trespassing! Leave now!" The lead rider turned his horse toward her. Even with the bandana covering his face, she knew him. The size of him. The way he sat his horse like he owned the world. Silas Crow himself had come to deliver this message personally. "Well now." Crow's voice was muffled but recognizable. "The bought woman has teeth. Where's Mackenzie?" "Not here. And you're trespassing." Pretty little thing standing there with a gun too big for her. Crow urged his horse a few steps closer.
"You even know how to use that?"
Clara aimed and fired. The shot cracked through the night like judgment. It caught Crow's shoulder. Not a killing shot, but enough to make him jerk back in his saddle with a howl of pain and rage. His horse reared. Blood bloomed dark on his shirt. "The next one goes through your chest," Clara said, her voice steel. "Leave, now." For a moment that stretched into eternity, Crow stared at her. Even through the bandana she could feel his hatred, his shock at being bested by a woman he had tried to buy. But then his men were pulling at his reins, urging their horses away, and the 3 riders thundered off into the darkness, leaving destruction in their wake. Clara stood there shaking, the rifle barrel still smoking. Pete hobbled over to her, eyes wide with something like awe. "Miss Clara, that was the damnedest thing I ever saw. You just shot Silas Crow." "I just defended this ranch. There's a difference." But her voice was hollow. She looked at the burning barn, at the scattered cattle, at the chaos that was already costing Cole thousands of dollars. "We need to get those cattle contained before they run too far." They worked through the night, Clara and Pete and the one other ranch hand, whose name was Sam. Herding frightened animals back toward the corral, putting out spot fires where embers had landed on dry grass, trying to save what could be saved. The barn burned to its foundation, $2,000 of hay gone. But the house stood, the cattle were mostly recovered, and the twins were safe. Clara did not let herself think about the fact that she had shot a man, did not let herself process what his revenge for that would look like. She just kept moving, kept working, because stopping meant feeling, and she could not afford to feel yet. Cole and Miguel arrived just before dawn, riding at a gallop, having seen the smoke from miles away. Cole was off his horse before it fully stopped, his eyes wild, searching. He saw the burned barn, the exhausted figures still working, and then he saw Clara, covered in soot and ash, the rifle still in her hands, standing like a soldier who had held ground against impossible odds. "Clara." He said her name like a prayer and a curse, all at once. He crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms so hard it hurt. God, I thought I'd lost you." "The twins are in the cellar. They're safe." He released her, ran to the house, came back moments later with Sophie and Tommy clinging to him. Both children were crying now, the delayed reaction hitting them. They had been brave all night because Clara needed them to be brave. But now their father was here, and they could finally fall apart. Cole set them down, and they ran to Clara, wrapping their arms around her waist, burying their faces in her filthy dress. And Clara, who had held herself together through violence and fire and terror, finally broke. Silent tears ran down her face as she held these children she had not given birth to, but would die for, without hesitation. Miguel surveyed the damage with grim expertise. "Boss, this is bad. The barn, the hay, the time to round up scattered cattle, $10,000 of damage,
Maybe more. I don't care about the money. Cole's voice was rough. Are you hurt? This last question directed at Clara. No. Pete got shot at, but he's fine. I shot one of them, the leader. I think I hit his shoulder. You shot someone? Cole stared at her. It was Crow himself. He came here. He threatened us. I fired. Clara's voice was steady, despite the tears still falling. I would do it again. Something in Cole's face shifted. Pride, fear, a fierce protectiveness that went beyond employer and employee. He looked at her like she was something precious, something irreplaceable. You could have been killed. But I wasn't, and neither were your children. That's what matters. Cole wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that she mattered too, that the thought of arriving to find her dead had nearly stopped his heart. But the twins were there, and the ranch hands were watching, and it was not the time. So he just nodded and turned to organizing the cleanup. The next 2 days were a blur of work and worry. Cole filed a report with Sheriff Morrison, who hemmed and hawed, and said without witnesses or proof it was Clara's word against Crow's. The fact that Crow suddenly had a shoulder wound, he claimed came from a horse accident, proved nothing. The law, such as it was in Montana Territory, would not help them. But the town noticed. Word spread. The Bort woman had shot Silas Crow defending the Mackenzie Ranch and the Mackenzie children. Some whispered she was touched in the head, but others, mostly men who had worked land and understood what it meant to stand your ground, began to look at her differently, with a grudging respect. On the evening of the second day, Cole found Clara in the barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal. The barn was dim and quiet, smelling of hay and horses and leather. Clara ran her hand along the mare's swollen belly, murmuring soft words of comfort. Cole watched her from the doorway for a moment. This woman who had appeared in his life like divine intervention disguised as transaction. Then he stepped inside, and she turned at the sound of his boots on the packed earth floor. "Cole," she said, surprise in her voice. "I thought you were meeting with the lawyer again." "I was. It's done." He moved closer. "Clara, we need to talk." Something in his tone made her nervous. She straightened, wiping her hands on her skirt. "Did something happen with the custody case?" "No, not that." He stopped a few feet from her, and in the golden afternoon light slanting through the barn slats, she could see how tired he looked, how the weight of everything was crushing him. "When I bought you at that auction, I told you it was practical, strategic, a way to block Crow and get help with my children. I remember. I lied." The admission hung between them. "Not about needing help, that was true. But the reason I bid, the real reason, it wasn't strategy. It was you." Clara's breath caught. "Cole, I saw you on that platform, and something in me recognized something in you. Like calls to like, broken to broken. I saw strength in you that I needed. Not just for my children, for myself. I was drowning, Clara. Drowning in grief and responsibility and loneliness. And you were drowning too. And I thought maybe, if we were going to drown anyway, we could at least keep each other's heads above water." He took another step closer. They were near enough now that she could see the silver threads in his dark hair, could count the lines that pain had etched around his eyes. "But somewhere between that day and this moment," Cole continued, his voice dropping lower, "I stopped drowning. You taught me how to breathe again. You brought life back to my children. You brought life back to me. And I have to tell you, because I can't keep it inside anymore, I love you, Clara Hayes." The words landed like stones dropped in still water, ripples spreading outward, changing everything. "I know I have no right," Cole went on when she did not speak. "You're 18. I'm twice your age. You were bought. How can anything real grow from that foundation? But it did. God help me, it did. And I don't know what to do about it except tell you the truth and hope you don't run." Clara stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. 1,000 thoughts crashed through her mind simultaneously. This could not be real. Men like Cole did not love women like her. But the look in his eyes was not lying. The rawness in his voice was not performance. This was truth. Painful, complicated, impossible truth. "I've loved you since the fever night," she whispered. Cole's eyes closed briefly. "Clara, we haven't had a fever night. The children haven't been sick." "No," Clara shook her head. "Not yet. But I know it's coming. I can feel it. And when it does, when they're burning with fever, and you're terrified of losing them like you lost Sarah, that's when I'll prove to you that I'm not going anywhere, that I'll fight death itself to keep them safe. And that's when you'll know, truly know, that what I feel for you is real." Cole pulled her close, unable to resist any more. "Then I pray that night never comes, because I can't bear the thought of them in danger." "But if it does," Clara said, her hands fisting in his shirt, "we'll face it together." They kissed then, desperate and fierce and full of everything they had both been holding back for weeks. Clara's hands pulled him closer, and Cole made a sound deep in his chest, like a man who had been starving and finally found sustenance. They broke apart, gasping. Cole rested his forehead against hers, both of them shaking. "Marry me," he said. "Today, tomorrow, next week, I don't care when. Just marry me and let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." And Clara, who wanted nothing more than to say yes, who wanted to fall into this man and this life and never look back, forced herself to step away, to put space between them, to think clearly despite the thundering of her heart. "I can't," she said. "Not yet." Cole looked like she had slapped him. "What?" "If we marry now, we prove Mrs. Whitmore right. We prove that you bought me to be your wife, that this was always about that. The judge will never let you keep Sophie and Tommy if we marry before the hearing." "I don't care what the judge thinks. I don't care what anyone thinks." "But I do." Clara's voice was firm, despite the tears still falling. "Those children deserve better than growing up under a cloud of scandal, deserve better than whispers about their father buying their stepmother like livestock. We have to wait. We have to win the custody case first. We have to show the town that I'm here because I choose to be, not because I'm obligated, not because I'm owned." Cole ran a hand through his hair, frustration and understanding warring on his face. "How long?" "Spring, after the hearing, after we've proven that this home is good for them, after the town has seen me be more than the bought woman. Then ask me again." "And you'll say yes?" "I'll say yes every day for the rest of my life. But we have to do this right. For them. They've lost too much already." Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, reluctantly, he nodded. "Spring. I can wait until spring." "But Clara, I'm telling you now, the moment that judge rules in our favor, the moment we're clear, I'm marrying you. I don't care if you're ready. I don't care if it's proper. You're mine and I'm yours, and that's the end of it." Despite everything, Clara smiled. "Is that a proposal or a threat?" "It's a promise." He pulled her close again, gentler this time. "And I don't break my promises." They stood there in the barn, holding each other, and neither mentioned the fact that Silas Crowe was out there somewhere, wounded and furious and plotting revenge. Neither mentioned that the custody hearing was still 2 weeks away. Neither mentioned all the ways this could still fall apart. For this moment, in golden light, with dust motes dancing in the air and horses breathing soft in their stalls, they let themselves have this, the acknowledgement of love, the promise of a future, the hope that broken things could heal and lost souls could find home. But fate had one more test for them before they could reach that future. It came a week later, when Sophie complained of stomach pain during supper. By bedtime, the girl was burning with fever. 103 degrees, Dr. Kent confirmed when Cole sent for him in a panic. An hour later, Tommy showed the same symptoms. Both twins thrashing in their beds, calling out for their mother in delirium, their small bodies racked with chills and heat by turns. Clara and Cole worked through the night. Cool compresses, forcing water down unwilling throats. Prayer whispered into the darkness. And Cole, watching his children fight the same battle that had killed Sarah, began to fracture. At 2 a.m, sitting between their beds, he broke. "This is how it started with Sarah," he said, his voice hollow. She said she felt warm. By morning she was burning. By the next night, she was gone. Clara grabbed his face, made him look at her. Cole, these are not Sarah.
We caught this early. They're strong. They're fighters.
I can't lose them. His voice cracked. I buried their mother. I can't bury them too. You won't. Clara's voice was steel. I won't let you. We'll fight this together. They worked in tandem through the darkest hours. Cole held Tommy while Clara sponged him with cool water. Clara sang to Sophie while Cole changed the compress on her forehead. When Dr. Kent returned at 4 in the morning, he found them both exhausted but relentless. All you can do now is wait, the doctor said quietly, and pray. Cole slumped in his chair, head in his hands. Clara saw him shaking, saw the tears he was trying to hide. She knelt before him, took his hands in hers. When did you become the thing I need most? Cole whispered, looking up at her with devastated eyes. When you gave me a reason to stay, Clara replied, her own tears falling.
They held each other while the twins fought their fevers, while dawn painted the sky beyond the window in shades of pink and gold, while the house held its breath, waiting to see if death would claim more victims from this family that had already lost so much. At 6 in the morning, Tommy's fever broke. An hour later, Sophie's followed. Both children fell into healing sleep, their breathing evening out, colour returning to their cheeks. Cole and Clara sat on the floor between the beds, backs against the wall, hands clasped together, too exhausted to move, too grateful to speak. You stayed, Cole finally said. When it mattered most, when I was falling apart, you stayed. I told you I would, Clara replied. I always keep my promises. Cole turned to look at her, and something in his face had fundamentally changed. The last wall had come down. The final barrier between them had dissolved in the crucible of shared terror and shared relief. Spring is too far away, he said. I need you to be mine, legally, completely, now.
We have to wait for the hearing. Then we wait. But Clara, understand this. You are already my wife, in every way that matters. The ceremony is just making it official. Clara nodded, too tired to argue, too full of emotion to do anything but hold his hand, and thank God that the children were alive, that Cole was here, that somehow, impossibly, they had survived another night. In their beds, Sophie and Tommy slept, safe, healing, loved beyond measure by two people who had found each other in the most unlikely way and built something beautiful from broken pieces. Outside, the Montana winter continued its march toward spring, and inside the Mackenzie ranch, a family that had been shattered was slowly, painfully, miraculously becoming whole. January brought snow to Montana territory, and with it, a brittle peace that fooled no one. The well continued to flow. The cattle survived on winter feed.
Sophie and Tommy grew more confident with each passing day, their laughter filling rooms that had been silent for too long.
Cole and Clara moved through the house like two magnets drawn together, but held apart by will and wisdom. They did not touch, except in passing, did not kiss again. But the air between them hummed with everything unspoken. The custody hearing was scheduled for January 15th, 1883, 2 weeks away. Clara threw herself into preparing, making sure the house was spotless, the children well-dressed and well-fed, everything perfect for when Judge Brennan came to inspect. She worked until her hands cracked from cold and cleaning, worked until exhaustion claimed her each night, worked to keep the fear at bay. Because Silas Crow had been too quiet. A wounded animal was most dangerous, and Crow was wounded in pride as much as body. The silence felt like the stillness before a tornado touches down, like the world holding its breath.
The storm broke on January 3rd, 1883.
Cole and Miguel rode to Silver Creek that morning to meet with the lawyer one final time before the hearing. They needed to be gone most of the day, reviewing testimony and legal strategy. Cole hesitated before leaving, some instinct warning him not to go. But the hearing was everything. Without it, nothing else mattered. "I'll be fine," Clara assured him at the door. "Pete is here. The twins will stay close to the house. We've been safe for weeks now." Cole kissed her forehead, a gesture that had become habit,
despite their agreement to wait. Lock the doors anyway, and if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you take them to the cellar and you don't come out until I get back. I will, I promise. She watched him ride away, and the morning stretched ahead, peaceful and ordinary. She made lunch for the twins, let them play in the light snow that had fallen overnight, building a misshapen snowman with stones for eyes. She stood at the kitchen window watching them, Sophie's laughter carrying across the yard like bells. That was when 5 riders emerged from the tree line. They came fast, purposeful, fanning out to surround the house before Clara could even process what she was seeing. She recognized the lead rider immediately, Silas Crow, arms still in a sling from her bullet, his face twisted with malice. Clara ran for the back door, calling for the children. "Sophie! Tommy! Inside now!" But 2 of Crow's men were already there, dismounting, moving with military precision. One grabbed Sophie, lifting her off the ground despite her kicking and screaming. The other seized Tommy, who fought silently, teeth bared like a cornered animal. Clara burst through the door, but Crow was waiting. He caught her with his good arm, backhanded her across the face hard enough that she went down. Stars exploded across her vision. Blood filled her mouth. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the twins screaming her name. "Clara! Clara!" She tried to get up. Crow kicked her in the ribs, and she went down again, gasping. Pete emerged from the barn, shotgun raised, but another of Crow's men shot him. The old man fell, clutching his leg, not dead, but wounded and helpless. Crow crouched beside Clara, grabbed her hair, forced her head up so she had to look at him. His breath stank of whiskey and tobacco. His eyes held the flat deadness of a man who had passed beyond caring about consequences. "Tell Mackenzie," he said, his voice like gravel. "He has until noon tomorrow. Bring the deed to his ranch to Devil's Canyon. Sign it over to me, or I kill his children. Both of them. Slow." "Please," Clara begged, all pride abandoned. "They're 6 years old. They're innocent. Please." "Nothing's innocent in this world." Crow released her, stood. 24 hours. Deed for kids. He comes alone. Anyone else shows up, I start cutting pieces off the boy and sending them back.
Sophie was still screaming, fighting the man who held her. "Clara, don't let them take us. Clara." Tommy's voice joined, thin and terrified. "Clara, help, please." Clara tried to crawl toward them, but Crow's boot on her back pinned her to the frozen ground. She could only watch as they dragged the twins to horses, bound their hands, and gagged them despite their struggles. Could only watch as they rode away, the children's muffled cries fading into the winter afternoon. The silence that followed was worse than the screaming. Clara lay in the snow, blood from her split lips staining the white ground red. Pete groaned from where he had fallen, and somewhere inside Clara, something broke. Not her will, not her courage, but the last fragile belief that good would triumph simply because it deserved to. That justice would prevail because the alternative was too terrible to contemplate.
She pushed herself up, staggered to Pete. The bullet had gone through his thigh, messy but not fatal if they stopped the bleeding. She tore strips from her petticoat, bound the wound as best she could with shaking hands, got him inside, made him as comfortable as possible. He kept apologizing, crying, saying he should have been faster, should have seen them coming. "It's not your fault," Clara told him, her voice hollow. "None of this is your fault." But it was hers. She knew it was hers. She had stayed when she should have left, had brought this danger to these children, had been stupid enough to think love could protect them from men like Crow. She stood at the window and waited for Cole to come home, waited to tell him she had failed, that the children he loved more than life were gone because she had not been strong enough, fast enough, good enough to stop it. The sun crossed the sky, afternoon bled into evening, and finally, just as twilight painted the snow purple and gold, she heard hoofbeats. Cole knew something was wrong the moment he crested the ridge. The ranch was too quiet. No smoke from the chimney, no children playing in the yard, no Clara at the door. He kicked his horse into a gallop, Miguel right behind him. He found her sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. Her face was bruised, her lips split, and her eyes, God,
Her eyes looked dead. "Clara!" He was off the horse before it stopped moving. "What happened? Where are the twins?" She looked up at him, and when she spoke, her voice was fractured glass. "Crow took them." The world tilted. Cole grabbed the porch railing to keep from falling. "What?" "5 men. They came at noon. I tried to stop them, but I couldn't. I wasn't strong enough. And they took Sophie and Tommy. And it's my fault. It's all my fault."
The words tumbled out in a rush, and then she was sobbing, great, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I failed them. I failed you." Cole pulled her up into his arms, and she collapsed against him. He held her while she fell apart, his own mind screaming. His children, his babies, in the hands of a man who had already proven himself capable of any cruelty. Miguel found Pete inside, got the story, came back out with a face like stone. "Boss, Crow says noon tomorrow, Devil's Canyon. You bring the ranch deed, sign it over, you get the kids back. You come alone, or he kills them." Cole's jaw clenched so hard, his teeth should have shattered. "He's lying. He'll take the deed and kill us all anyway. That's what this is. Revenge. He doesn't want the ranch. He wants to destroy me." "See, but what choice do we have?" "None." Cole looked down at Clara, still shaking in his arms. "We have no choice." But Clara pulled back, wiped her eyes with the heels of her hands. Something in her face had changed. The brokenness remained, but underneath it, steel had formed, forged in fire, tempered by loss. "No," she said, "we have a choice. We fight." "Clara, if we fight, he kills them." "He's going to kill them anyway. You said it yourself. This is revenge." "But Crow is arrogant. He thinks we're alone, that no one will help. So we prove him wrong. We get help. We make the town see what he really is." Miguel's eyes lit with understanding. "An ambush. We make him think Cole comes alone, but we surround the canyon." "They're children," Cole said, his voice breaking. "If shooting starts, they could be caught in the crossfire. If we do nothing, they die for certain." Clara grabbed his face, made him look at her. "Cole, trust me. One more time. Trust me." He stared into her eyes and saw the same strength that had captivated him on the auction block. Broken, but undefeated. Terrified, but refusing to surrender. She had saved them before. She would save them again. Or die trying. "Okay," he whispered. "What do you need?" "I need the town, all of them, and I need to ask." They rode to Silver Creek in full darkness, the 3 of them plus 2 ranch hands to stay with Pete. The town was shutting down for the night, shops closing, lamps being extinguished, but the church still glowed with light. Evening service. Perfect. Clara dismounted and walked straight through those church doors without hesitation. Cole and Miguel followed. The congregation turned as one, surprise rippling through the assembled townsfolk. Reverend Matthews paused mid-sermon. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore sat in the front pew, her face going cold at the sight of Clara. Clara walked down the center aisle, and she knew how she must look. Face bruised, dress torn and blood-stained, hair wild, like a mad woman, like a ghost. She reached the altar and turned to face them all. "I need help," she said. Her voice carried to every corner. "Silas Crow has kidnapped Sophie and Tommy Mackenzie, 2 6-year-old children. He says if Cole doesn't surrender his ranch by noon tomorrow, he'll kill them both." Gasps, murmurs. Mrs. Whitmore stood. "Why should we believe you? You've already proven yourself a liar, a woman of low character who would say anything to manipulate good Christian people." "You're right," Clara said, and her honesty shocked them into silence. "I am low. I was sold like cattle. I have no family, no breeding, no reason for any of you to trust me. But those children are innocent. They've already lost their mother. Now they're going to lose their lives if no one helps." "Crow is a respected rancher," someone called out. "He wouldn't harm children. He burned our barn, poisoned our water, shot our ranch hand, and now he has 2 terrified kids tied up somewhere, waiting to die, because he wants to hurt Cole. Because he wants revenge for losing what he thought he owned."
Clara's voice cracked, but she pushed through. "I'm begging. I know you hate me. You think I'm trash, white trash bought at auction, unworthy to breathe the same air as decent folk. And maybe you're right, but they are children." Her voice rose to something close to a scream. Tears poured down her face unchecked. "They call me Mama now. They're my babies even though I didn't give birth to them, and I will die to save them. But I can't do it alone. Cole can't do it alone. We need good people. Please. I'm begging. They're 6 years old." She fell to her knees, and the proud woman who had stood on the auction block with her chin high was gone. In her place knelt someone stripped of everything but raw desperation. "Please, help us save them. If you've ever loved a child, if you've ever known what it is to be helpless and afraid, please." The silence stretched. Clara kept her head bowed, waiting for rejection, for the door to close in her face one final time, for the confirmation that she was truly alone in this world. Then Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore stood. The old woman walked down the aisle, and Clara braced for the final blow, for the judgment that would seal the children's fate. But Mrs. Whitmore did not strike. She knelt beside Clara in the dirt and dust of the church floor, and when she spoke, her voice shook. "Sarah Mackenzie was the dearest friend of my life. I have hated you because I thought you were trying to erase her, trying to steal what was hers. But watching you now, hearing you speak of her children with such love, such desperation, I understand. You are not trying to replace Sarah. You are trying to honor her by loving what she loved most." Mrs. Whitmore turned to the congregation, still kneeling. "If Sarah were here, she would fight. She would rage against heaven itself to save her babies. And if we claim to honor her memory, we will do the same." She stood, drawing Clara up with her. "Who will stand with me?" Reverend Matthews stepped down from his pulpit. "I will. I fought at Shiloh. I know how to handle a rifle." Sheriff Morrison stood next, shamefaced but determined. "I've been a coward. Let Crow buy my loyalty. Let him commit crimes I pretended not to see. No more. Children are the line I won't cross." Then others, the blacksmith, 3 ranchers, a widow who ran the boarding house, the doctor. 20 people in total, standing in the church, pledging themselves to save 2 children most of them barely knew. Clara's legs gave way. Cole caught her, held her as she sobbed against his chest. Not from sadness now, from something more complicated, from the terrible beauty of strangers choosing to be heroes, from the proof that humanity, at its core, was still capable of rising to meet darkness with light. They spent the night planning. Cole drew maps of Devil's Canyon, marking approaches and sightlines. Miguel organized the men into groups, assigning positions. Sheriff Morrison deputized everyone, making it official, legal. They would be acting under law, even if law had failed them until now. Clara sat silent through most of it, Tommy's wooden horse clutched in her hands. Someone had found it in the snow where he had dropped it. She ran her fingers over the worn wood and thought about a little boy who had trusted her, who had finally learned to speak freely around her, who had called her his family. She thought about Sophie's fierce defiance and tender heart. She thought about losing them, and something inside her turned to iron. "I'm coming," she said, cutting through the tactical discussion. Cole looked up. "No, absolutely not. Those are my children too. Clara, you could be killed. So could you. So could anyone here. But I'm coming. They need to see me, need to know I fought for them, that I didn't give up." She stood, and there was something in her face that stopped all argument. "I let them be taken once. I won't fail them again." Cole started to protest, but Miguel put a hand on his arm. "Let her come, amigo. She has earned this right." The group dispersed near midnight, heading home to prepare, to say goodbyes to families just in case, to gather weapons and courage in equal measure. Only Cole and Clara remained in the church, sitting in a pew, hands clasped together in the darkness. "If we don't make it," Cole said quietly, "I need you to know something. Don't. Listen, if we don't make it, I need you to know that these last months have been the happiest of my life since Sarah died. You gave me back my children. You gave me back myself. You gave me hope. Whatever happens tomorrow, that was enough. You were enough." Clara turned to face him, tears streaming down her bruised face. "When we survive this, when we get them back, I'm marrying you that same day."
I don't care about propriety. I don't care about the hearing. I don't care what anyone thinks. You're mine. I'm yours. And nothing will separate us again.
"Is that a proposal?"
It's a promise.
She kissed him then, desperate and fierce and full of everything they might not survive to say tomorrow. When they broke apart, both were crying. "I love you," Cole said, "more than I knew I could love again." "I love you too, and we're going to save them. We're going to bring our children home." They rode back to the ranch in darkness, and neither spoke of the 1,000 ways this could go wrong, of Crow's men outnumbering them, of the children being caught in crossfire, of the very real possibility that by this time tomorrow they might all be dead. But they also did not speak of surrender, of giving up, of letting evil win simply because fighting was hard and dangerous and likely to fail. They would fight. They would risk everything, because that was what love demanded.
What family required. What being human meant. In the Montana darkness, stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant and indifferent to human suffering. But in the hearts of 23 people preparing for battle, something burned that was neither cold nor indifferent, something that had sustained humanity through every dark age and every terrible trial. The willingness to stand between evil and the innocent, to say, "Not here, not now, not while I still draw breath." To choose death over submission, to fight for what mattered, even when victory seemed impossible. Dawn would come, the battle would be joined, and whatever happened in Devil's Canyon, it would be written in blood and courage, and the desperate love of broken people trying to save broken children. But that was tomorrow's story. Tonight, they prepared, they prayed, they held each other in the darkness, and they tried to believe that sometimes, when you fought for what was right, the universe bent toward justice. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes was enough to hope, and hope was enough to fight. Dawn came to Devil's Canyon cold and merciless, the kind of Montana morning where breath frosted in the air and the sun offered light but no warmth. The canyon walls rose 40 feet on either side, red sandstone carved by millennia of water and wind into a natural amphitheater. It was the perfect place for an execution, defensible, contained, far enough from town that screams would not carry. Cole Mackenzie rode in alone at 5 minutes before noon, as instructed. He sat tall in the saddle, the ranch deed folded in his coat pocket, his hands visible and empty. No gun on his hip, no rifle on his saddle, just a father coming to trade everything he owned for the lives of his children. What Silas Crow could not see were the 23 people hidden in the rocks above. Sheriff Morrison and 10 men on the north rim, Reverend Matthews with 8 more on the east side, Miguel Santos leading 4 ranchers on the south approach, and Clara, against all wisdom and advice, tucked into a narrow crevice on the western wall with a direct line to where the children were being held. They had arrived before first light, moving in darkness, taking positions in silence. Now they waited, fingers on triggers, watching the man they had come to save ride into what looked like certain death. Crow stood in the center of the canyon floor, arrogant as a king in his domain. 15 men flanked him, all armed, rifles trained on the canyon entrance. And behind Crow, tied to a dead cottonwood tree, were Sophie and Tommy. Both children were gagged, their faces tear-stained and terrified. Sophie's dress was torn. Tommy had a bruise darkening his left cheek. But they were alive. That was all that mattered. When Tommy saw his father ride in, his eyes went wide. He tried to scream through the gag, tried to warn him it was a trap, but the sound came out muffled and desperate. "Mackenzie!" Crow called out, his voice echoing off stone walls. "Punctual as always. I appreciate that in a man, even one I'm about to destroy." Cole dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate, unthreatening. "I have the deed. Let my children go, and it's yours."
You think I'm stupid? Crow laughed, and his men joined in, a chorus of mockery. I take the deed, you get witnesses, you claim I extorted it. No, here's what happens. You sign it over. Then you, your bought whore, and those brats all die. Tragic accident, terrible shame. But that ranch will be mine, legal and proper, before anyone knows you're dead. Cole's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. You're going to kill us anyway, so why would I sign? Because if you do, I'll make it quick. 1 bullet each, fast, painless. If you don't, I start cutting pieces off your children while you watch. I've got all day, Mackenzie. How long do you think that boy will last before he bleeds out? The threat hung in the cold air like smoke. Cole looked at his children, at their terrified faces, and something inside him that had been carefully controlled for 3 years finally broke. Not his courage, his restraint, his willingness to play by civilized rules when facing a monster. You made one mistake, Crow, Cole said quietly. What's that? You assumed I was alone. Cole raised his right hand, the signal they had agreed upon. 23 rifles appeared on the canyon rims, trained on Crow and his men from 3 sides. Sheriff Morrison's voice boomed down, amplified by the stone walls. Silas Crow, you're under arrest for kidnapping, extortion, arson, and attempted murder. Drop your weapons now. For one frozen heartbeat, no one moved. Then Crow's face twisted with rage, and he screamed orders to his men. Kill them! Kill them all! The canyon erupted in gunfire. Clara did not wait for the shooting to start. The moment Cole gave the signal, she was moving. Down the narrow path she had scouted at first light, using every rock and shadow for cover. Bullets whined off stone above her head. Men screamed. The chaos of battle was her ally. She reached the cottonwood tree where the twins were tied. Both children saw her, and their eyes went impossibly wider. Sophie tried to say her name through the gag. Tommy was crying, trembling, making sounds that broke Clara's heart. I've got you, Clara said, her hands working at the knots. I've got you both. I promised I'd come back. I always come back. The rope on Sophie's hands came free first. Clara ripped the gag from the girl's mouth, and Sophie gasped in air like a drowning person breaking the surface. Clara, they said they were going to kill us. They said Papa wasn't coming. Hush now, baby. You're safe. Clara moved to Tommy, fingers working frantically at the knots binding his small wrists.
Almost there, sweetheart. Almost free.
That was when she saw Silas Crow turn away from the gunfight, saw him spot her with the children, saw the hatred and desperation in his face as he raised his pistol and fired. The bullet caught Clara in the left shoulder, spinning her around. Pain exploded white and hot through her entire body. She went down hard, hand pressed to the wound. Blood seeped between her fingers, warm and red and too much. Clara! Sophie screamed. Clara! Tommy's gag came loose, and he found his voice for the first time since the kidnapping. Not his normal, quiet voice. A scream that came from somewhere primal and terrified and absolutely certain. Mama! Mama, no! The word hung in the air. Mama. Not Clara. Not Miss Clara. Mama. Something in Clara that had been fractured suddenly locked into place. She was not the bought woman anymore. Not the orphan. Not the girl sold at auction. She was Mama. And mothers did not quit. Did not surrender.
Did not let monsters win.
She grabbed the rifle she had brought, ignoring the agony in her shoulder, raised it one-handed. Tommy was still tied, still vulnerable, and Crow was walking toward them, reloading, death in his eyes. Clara aimed, fired. The shot took Crow in the center of his chest. He staggered, looked down at the spreading red stain with something like surprise, looked up at Clara with the understanding that he had been killed by the woman he had tried to buy, the woman he had underestimated, the woman who had proven stronger than he had ever imagined possible. He fell, did not get up, would never get up again. Clara's vision swam. She was losing too much blood, but Tommy was crying, still tied, and she had to finish this. Had to get him free. Her fingers felt thick and clumsy as she worked at the last knot, but finally it came loose, and Tommy threw himself at her, wrapping his small arms around her neck, sobbing into her shoulder. "Mama! Mama, you came!"
"You came for us." "Always," Clara whispered, holding him with her good arm. "I will always come for you." Sophie joined the embrace, all three of them huddled against the cottonwood, while gunfire echoed around them. Above, the battle was turning. Crow's men, seeing their leader dead, were throwing down weapons and raising hands in surrender. Sheriff Morrison was taking prisoners. Miguel was making sure none escaped. The townspeople, who had risked everything to save 2 children, were winning. Cole ran through the chaos, oblivious to danger, focused only on reaching his family. He dropped to his knees beside them, gathering all 3 into his arms. Sophie and Tommy talking over each other, both crying, both trying to explain everything at once. Clara sagging against him, her blood soaking into his shirt. "Clara, God, you're hit." Cole's hands found the wound, applied pressure. "Miguel, I need the doctor now." Dr. Kent was already climbing down, medical bag in hand. But Clara grabbed Cole's face with her good hand, made him look at her. "I'm okay. We're all okay. We won." "You're bleeding." "But we won." She smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Cole had ever seen. Blood on her teeth, pain in her eyes, but victory in her smile. "We saved them. Our children are safe." She passed out then, and Cole held her while the doctor worked. While Sheriff Morrison secured the prisoners, while the townspeople climbed down from their positions and stood looking at the carnage they had wrought in the name of 2 children. Silas Crow lay dead in the dirt, killed by the woman he had tried to possess. His men were in chains, and justice, which had seemed so impossible just 24 hours ago, had been served. The ride back to Silver Creek was slow. Clara regained consciousness halfway there, riding in front of Cole, his arms supporting her. The bullet had gone clean through. Dr. Kent said she would heal if infection did not set in. She would carry the scar forever, but she would live. 2 weeks later, on a cold morning in late January, the custody hearing convened in Judge Howard Brennan's courtroom. Cole sat at one table, his lawyer beside him. Clara sat behind, her arm in a sling, pale but present. Sophie and Tommy were in the front row, both dressed in their best clothes, both terrified of what might happen. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore was called to testify first. The old woman stood, and when she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the room. "Your Honor, I was wrong about Miss Hayes. I judged her by how she came to the Mackenzie Ranch, rather than by who she proved herself to be. I watched her risk her life to save children who are not her blood, watched her take a bullet meant for them, watched her become what Sarah Mackenzie would have wanted for her babies, a mother who loves them without reservation, a woman of courage and strength who teaches them by example what it means to be good." Mrs. Whitmore turned to Clara, and tears ran down her weathered face. "Miss Hayes, I owe you an apology. You are not replacing my friend. You are honoring her by becoming exactly what those children needed. Someone who fights for them, someone who stays, someone who loves them enough to die for them." The courtroom was silent except for quiet weeping. Even the judge had to clear his throat before speaking. "Miss Hayes, you may approach." Clara stood, walked to the witness stand with her head high despite her injury, took the oath with her good hand on the Bible. "Miss Hayes, why should these children remain in Mr. Mackenzie's custody when you, a woman purchased at auction, reside in the home?" Clara met the judge's eyes without flinching. "Your Honor, I was sold. That's true. I did not choose that. But I chose everything that came after. I chose to stay. I chose to love those children. I chose to fight for them. And if I had to stand on that auction block every day for the rest of my life to keep them safe, I would do it gladly. Because they are mine. Not by blood, not by law, but by choice. And choice is stronger than any bond blood can forge." The judge nodded slowly. "Mr. Mackenzie, do you have anything to add?" Cole stood. "Yes, Your Honor. When I bought Clara at that auction, I thought I was getting a housekeeper. What I got was a miracle. She gave my children back their childhood. She gave me back my life.
She risked everything, asked for nothing, and loved us when we were barely capable of loving ourselves. If you take these children from us, you don't just punish me. You punish them for having the courage to love again after loss. You punish her for having the strength to stand when others ran. And you tell every child in this territory that love doesn't matter, that only blood and propriety count. I'm asking you, begging you, don't do that. Judge Brennan looked at the twins. Sophie and Tommy Mackenzie approached the bench. The children walked forward together, holding hands, looking impossibly small in the formal courtroom. The judge came down from behind his desk, knelt to their level. His voice gentled. Sophie, who do you want to live with? Sophie's voice was clear, certain. Papa and Mama Clara. Miss Hayes is not your mother, child. That was when Tommy exploded. The quiet boy who had barely spoken for 2 years found his voice in that moment, and what came out was fury and love and absolute conviction. Yes, she is. He was crying now, his whole body shaking. She is our mama. She stayed when everyone left. She taught me I could be brave. She sang to us and held us and saved us. She took a bullet for us. She's our mama. And if you take her away, I'll run away. I'll run away and find her because she's mine. The courtroom erupted, not in protest, in tears. Every person in that room, from the clerk to the lawyers to the spectators in the gallery, was weeping. Even Judge Brennan had to wipe his eyes before he could speak. Custody is granted permanently to Cole Mackenzie, he said, his voice thick. This court finds the home environment to be not only suitable, but exemplary. These children are loved, they are safe, and that is all that matters. He looked at Clara. Miss Hayes, you have given me hope that there is still goodness in this world. Thank you. The gavel came down, final, irrevocable. The twins were safe, the family was whole, and Clara collapsed into Cole's arms, sobbing with relief so profound it felt like being born again. 1 week later, on a crisp February morning, they gathered at the church. Clara wore a dress of cream-coloured silk, purchased by Mrs. Whitmore as a wedding gift and apology combined. Her arm was still in a sling, but she had never looked more beautiful.
Cole stood at the altar in his only suit, freshly pressed, his eyes wet before the ceremony even began. Sophie and Tommy stood beside them, Sophie holding a bouquet of dried wildflowers, Tommy clutching the rings with terrified concentration. Reverend Matthews cleared his throat, smiled at the assembled crowd. Half the town had come, everyone who had fought at Devil's Canyon, everyone who had witnessed the transformation of a bought woman into a mother, a hero, a saint. Dearly beloved, the Reverend began, but Cole interrupted. Wait! He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, the ranch deed, and beneath it, the receipt from the auction. $475 paid for one Clara Hayes. Before God and these witnesses, Cole said, his voice ringing clear, I want everyone to see this. He held up the auction receipt. This paper says I bought Clara, that she was my property, that money changed hands and ownership was transferred. But that was always a lie. He tore the receipt in half, then in quarters, then into pieces so small they could never be reassembled. He let the scraps fall like snow at Clara's feet. Clara was never bought. She can never be owned. She is free. She has always been free. And what we do today, we do not because of obligation or debt or anything written on paper. We do it because we choose each other, every day, for the rest of our lives. Now, Reverend, you may proceed. There was not a dry eye in the church. The vows were simple, traditional. But when Cole said, I do, it carried the weight of 3 years of grief transformed into hope. And when Clara said, I do, it carried the weight of 18 years of worthlessness transformed into belonging. You may kiss your bride. Cole cupped Clara's face with both hands, careful of her injured shoulder, and kissed her like a man who had been given back his life. The congregation erupted in applause. Sophie and Tommy crashed into them from both sides, creating a 4-person embrace that the photographer, hastily summoned, captured for posterity. That image would hang in the Mackenzie house for the next 70 years, a testament to the moment a family became whole. The reception was held at the ranch, tables set up in the yard, food provided by seemingly every woman in Silver Creek. There was music and dancing and laughter that echoed across the land. Clara danced with Cole, carefully, mindful of her shoulder. Then with Miguel, who cried openly and told her she was the bravest person he had ever known. Then with Sheriff Morrison, who apologized for his cowardice and swore to be better. Then with the twins, both of them standing on her feet as she swayed to the music, all three of them grinning like fools. As the sun set and the celebration continued, Cole pulled Clara away to the porch.
They stood at the railing watching their wedding party, watching the twins play with other children, watching a community that had come together to fight darkness, now celebrating light. "Happy?" Cole asked, his arm around her waist. Clara leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. "Happier than I knew was possible. 3 months ago I was standing on an auction block, certain my life was over. Now I have a husband, children, a home, people who fought beside me, bled beside me. How did this happen?" "You happened. You refused to quit, refused to be less than you were, and you showed all of us what courage looks like. I was terrified every moment. That's what makes it courage, being terrified and doing it anyway." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the first stars appear. Then Clara spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "Do you think they're watching? Sarah and my father? Do you think they see what we built from the ashes of what we lost? I think they're proud. I think they're at peace. And I think they're glad we found each other." Clara turned in his arms, looked up at the man who had saved her by giving her the chance to save herself. "I love you, Cole Mackenzie. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, always. I love you, Clara Mackenzie, and that's a name you chose, a name you earned. Never forget that." They kissed as the Montana sky turned from blue to purple to black, as stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, as a party celebrating love and courage and the triumph of good over evil continued around them. 21 years later, in the summer of 1904, Clara sat on that same porch in a rocking chair, watching her grandchildren play in the yard. 5 of them now, Sophie's 3 and Tommy's 2, ranging in age from 10 months to 8 years, all running wild and free the way children should. Sophie was 31 now, married to a good man who managed the ranch's expanding cattle operation. Tom was also 31, having taken over day-to-day operations from his father, who now spent his days offering advice and playing with grandchildren. Both twins had grown into remarkable adults, strong, compassionate, brave. Cole emerged from the house, 57 years old now, his hair silver, his movements slower, but his eyes still sharp and kind. He settled into the rocking chair beside Clara's, took her hand in his like he had every day for 21 years. "Clara, Clara!" The oldest grandchild ran up, breathless. "Tell us the story again." "Which story, sweetling?" "How you met Grandpa. How you were sold like a horse and then saved everyone and shot the bad man." Sophie appeared, now a mother herself, laughing at her daughter's enthusiasm. "You were sold like livestock, Mama. Don't sugarcoat it for them." Tommy joined them, his own son on his shoulders, and saved everyone's life. Don't forget that part. Clara smiled, looking around at this impossible family she had built. "It's a long story." "We have time," the grandchildren chorused. So Clara told it. About the auction block and the cold man who bid too much. About 2 children who tested her and a well that saved them. About a villain who thought power meant everything and learned too late that love was stronger. About a town that came together when it mattered most. About taking a bullet and firing one in return. About choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier. And when she finished, the youngest grandchild, only 3 years old, climbed into her lap and said, "You're brave, Grandma." "No, darling, I was terrified, but I did what needed doing anyway." Cole squeezed her hand. "That's the definition of brave." As the sun set on another Montana summer evening, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Clara Mackenzie, née Hayes, thought about the girl she had been, standing on that auction block with nothing but pride to protect her, certain her life had ended. unable to imagine that pain could transform into joy, that loss could become finding, that being sold could lead to being chosen. "They measured me in dollars once," she said softly, though whether to Cole or to herself or to the universe at large, she could not say. $475. But they got the math wrong, because you cannot price freedom. You cannot bid on belonging. You cannot buy love. That day I thought I was being sold, I was actually being saved. Saved by a man who gave me a choice, by children who needed me as much as I needed them, by a community that taught me people can be better than their worst moments, and by my own stubborn refusal to let circumstances define me. She looked at Cole, and the love between them after 21 years was no less than it had been on their wedding day, perhaps deeper.
Tested and proven and polished by decades of partnership.
"I'd do it all again," Clara whispered. "Every painful moment, every terrifying choice, all of it, because it led me here, to you, to them, to this." Cole brought her hand to his lips, kissed it gently. "And I'd pay that $475 1,000 times over. Best investment I ever made." "Investment?" She elbowed him lightly. "Best decision," he corrected, grinning. "Best miracle, best gift from God." Better. They rocked together as the grandchildren played, and their own children watched over them, and the ranch that had nearly been lost to villainy thrived under good stewardship. They rocked and remembered, and gave thanks for all the impossible things that had to happen for them to find each other. For Clara to be standing on that auction block on that particular day. For Cole to be there to see her. For two broken people to recognize the possibility of healing in each other's brokenness.
And when full darkness fell, and the family moved inside for supper, when the laughter and love filled every corner of the house that had once been hollow, Clara paused at the threshold and looked back at the Montana night. Somewhere out there, she thought, other people were suffering. Other people stood on their own auction blocks, literal or metaphorical, certain their lives were ending. Other people needed to know that sometimes, impossibly, against all odds, broken things could heal. Lost souls could find home. Love could triumph over every logical argument against it. Her story was proof, living proof, that courage and choice and stubborn refusal to surrender could transform even the darkest beginning into the most beautiful ending. She went inside to her family, her chosen family, her earned family. The family built not on blood or obligation, but on the radical act of loving completely, despite every reason not to. And if you visit the Mackenzie Ranch today, a century and a half later, you can still see the foundation of the house where they lived, can still trace the path Clara took that terrible January day to save the children who became hers, can still stand in Devil's Canyon where justice was finally served. But more importantly, you can see the legacy they built, not in buildings or land, but in the idea that echoed down through generations of Mackenzies, who never forgot the woman who had been bought at auction and became the foundation of their family. That people are not defined by what happens to them, but by what they choose to do next. That love, real love, the kind that risks everything and asks for nothing, is the most powerful force in the universe. And that sometimes, just sometimes, when you refuse to surrender to darkness, when you choose hope over despair and action over paralysis, the universe bends toward justice. Not always, but sometimes.
And Clara Mackenzie proved that sometimes was enough.